Could you survive a day in the life of a medieval peasant? And to put it quite bluntly, their lives were hard and short. During this time, about 85% of people were rural peasants, and this included anyone from serfs who were legally tied to the land that they tended, to freemen who had a little bit more rights and could accrue wealth. This video will be focusing on the peasants who were farmers. Your first challenge was to avoid the high rates of infant mortality and make it past childhood. Only 50% of children live past the age of 1. But with all the diseases and famine floating about, you never knew when tragedy would strike. If you were a farmer during this time, your life revolved around the agrarian calendar, which centered around the sun. This made sense because they didn't exactly have electrical lights that they could just turn on in the dark. In the summer, the workday could start as early as 3 a.m. and end at dusk, which is a very long day toiling in the fields. As mentioned in my previous video, they typically ate 3 times a day: breakfast, dinner at midday, and then a lighter supper in the evening. And if you'd like to learn more about what they ate, please watch the previous video in this playlist. The house they woke up in was typically one room with an earthen floor, little ventilation, and few windows or sources of light. And they smelled pretty bad from oil or fat-based candles. When it was cold, they'd burn a fire in the middle of the house, which made it pretty smoky inside. And your family wasn't the only one living there. Typically, livestock animals lived in the house with you. So yeah, they weren't super clean. If you lived on a manor by a castle, your family was assigned a strip of land to tend to that you paid to rent from a lord. Typical crops grown included rye, oats, and barley, which were then harvested with a sickle, scythe, or reaper. Peasants would work cooperatively with other families on tasks such as plowing and haying. Their farming tasks for the day depended on what time of year it was, with tasks varying month to month. In addition to farming, peasants were required to build roads, clear forests, and do pretty much any other task determined by the lord. Their own land wasn't the only land that they were required to tend to. Peasants were required to work on church land for free, and no one dared break this rule for fear of angering God. On top of rent for their land, peasants paid a tithe to the church, which was the equivalent of 10% of their production for the year. This could be paid with either cash or goods such as seeds or equipment. After your taxes were paid, you kept the rest. Unsurprisingly, these taxes were extremely unpopular because they could literally make or break a family. When the majority of your time is spent trying to make sure that you have enough food to literally survive the next year, it's hard to give up things that are essential to this process. Women and children typically stayed at home unless you were part of the 20% of women that did not survive childbirth. Mothers would teach their daughters domestic chores such as spinning wool, and sons would learn how to farm. So this was your life until you passed away at the ripe old age of 25 to 35, which was the life expectancy at the time. So do you think you could have survived as a medieval peasant? Let me know.